Hi! New format, well, not permanent, but we just wanted to do a little something special for Barbie. So
Can you tell?
Can you tell? We just saw Oppenheimer. Just kidding.
Look at Elena's dress. Isn't it so cute? Little puppy
We're
sleeves.
thinking it'll be my Halloween costume this year because
So cute.
super unique. I'm sure I'll be Barbie.
And Kira's got the air blowing really hard because I'm menopausal, having hot flashes, so I would turn down the air so we could hear better, but I can't. Literally can't.
No, y'all are just gonna have to deal.
Yeah.
Okay, initial reactions. We have not spoken to each other about the movie since leaving the theater 10 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago.
We did stop and make photos. We got in the photo booth and took little photos. So cute! We haven't done that before.
Yeah, you and I have never done
We've
that.
never done that, so that was special. That was a good thinking on my daughter's part. Excellent job, Elena.
Good memory. All right, let's get down to it, girl.
Okay. You want me to go?
You go, because this is my second time seeing it. So I've already had time to form my thoughts. But so I'll bounce off of what you say.
Okay. My initial thoughts are worth the money, worth seeing it in the movie theater once. I would recommend seeing it in the movie theater because the cinematography and the sets are absolutely gorgeous. They are. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and the costumes.
Costuming, yes. And the thing about the sets is, and my bestie Lisa had said this morning, she's like, it's like they're lifelike toys. And that was exactly what Greta Gerwig wanted, the director wanted, was that you felt like you could reach out and play with the set. And I felt like that. Did you feel like that?
Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. My initial thoughts, so we're just going to say the movie initial thoughts because I have a lot of background thoughts that we're going to talk about later this evening. But from a movie perspective, and I know this is already out on the internet, this is clearly about so much more than just, Barbie as a toy, or even Barbie and her controversy. And the tagline that I think of is femininity versus feminism. And how do you come to peace with that? Where is the middle ground? Is there a middle ground? And I think they did a really wonderful job of exploring every kind of aspect of that. I have a couple of issues that I want to talk about later, but just from a movie perspective, I went in thinking they had done the wrong thing casting Ryan Gosling. I don't know why I thought that. I just was like, nope, he's not a Ken. He's attractive. He's not my kind of it's not that square cut jaw of a Ken that I think of when I think of Ken, and I could not have been more wrong. I thought he was absolutely fantastic in this role. I thought Margot Robbie did an amazing job of the complexity of how do you portray somebody this amazingly beautiful on a depth and a level that still gets the message across. And I thought she was phenomenal.
Yes.
What about you?
No,
both.
Well, you've said a lot, so it's hard for me to grasp what you're saying. But I know what you're saying, but you just said a lot for me to comment on. But no, there's so much to unpack with this movie. I think, like you said, it's not a Barbie movie. It is a movie about womanhood, human life.
Yes.
And Barbie's just the vehicle. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's well said. Yes. That's so well said. She's the vehicle. Just like, apples are the vehicle for the peanut butter.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Bagels are the vehicle for cream cheese.
Or butter.
Or butter.
We're not judging.
Avocado. You're a healthy person.
Rhea Perlman. Or
Will Smith.
Will Ferrell does, kind of a main role. Those were icing on the cake. They completed it for me.
Yeah.
I would have enjoyed it anyway, but it made it more fun, especially Will Ferrell and his timing, obviously.
So when I first saw this, I saw it by myself because she was sick. I couldn't be with her, and all my friends were going to Oppenheimer, and I was like, I don't want to go to that, and I don't want to sit at home alone sad. So I went to go see Barbie by myself, and it's so funny because I'm so grateful for TikTok because, as we'll get into later, it's really helped me understand the multiple messages in this movie. But I also think it did a lot of overhyping, where, you know how when we were talking about sequels that the first time you watch it you're like, no, and then you watch it the second time and you notice more things and you're like, oh, I actually do love this. That's how I felt with Barbie. Like, I still loved all the messages, but the storyline itself, I said initially, I was like, it feels like an SNL movie where like everything is camp and everything is a farce, but then also it's like extremely deep. And so I felt confused by that the first time around because I just wasn't expecting it. And I had felt like there was no like through line with the movie. Like it was like Ken, but I guess they kind of addressed that at the end where it's like there's the Kens and then there's the humans and like the other Barbies, but like what about stereotypical Barbie, you know? So I don't know if that was intentional, but I think the first time it was like a little bit of overwhelm, and there's so many things to unpack with it. But after watching it and then watching a lot of TikToks of people's takes on it and the hidden meanings in the movie made me love it so much more. So that then the second time around, I was like, wow. Like, I just noticed so much more, and I understood it so much better because other people had explained it to me via TikTok.
Everything that you just said resonates with me so hard that I want to make a point before we stop this part of it to move on to deeper dive. And let me say this. We've not said anything that's going to spoil the movie for anyone up until this point. So if you've not seen it, before you go, I would very much recommend watching this documentary that's on Hulu. It is called Tiny Shoulders, Reimagining Barbie. Okay, and it released in 2018. I think it was over a span of 2015-16, something around those lines, where they were filming the changes that were made to Barbie during that time in the between 2010 and now. And having that perspective from that documentary absolutely changed how I saw this movie. I would not have been as emotionally impacted if I hadn't heard that information first. So if you haven't seen it and you haven't gone to see Barbie yet, I highly recommend watching that Hulu documentary before you go see the movie. I think it will change your perspective.
Good point. My recommendation before you go see the movie is low expectations, open mind, and watch a bunch of TikToks explaining it to you afterwards.
And I will say, that's interesting what you said earlier about the campiness, the SNL-ness of it, that it felt disjointed the first time that you saw it. And I do think that was...
Disjointed is a great way of saying it.
Oh, okay. I do think that was done on purpose because they didn't want you to lose the imagination part of thinking that you were actually in Barbie Land. It had to be over the top for you to buy into the fact that this was really a real place.
Right. And it does, I think that's such a good point because it does draw a very hard line between Barbie Land and the real world. And I think that's why I was like, but it's so funny and silly, but it's so serious and deep. And like I'm pretty sure is what Greta probably wanted us to think.
Yep.
So the more, this is what I'm talking about, is like the more I think about it, I'm like,
so much.
It's so complex, but it's so funny, but it's so deep. It's like existential crisis.
That's so well put. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it, because when we come back, there's going to be spoilers.
Yes. All right, we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
Hey girl. Hey Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
How are you, Barbie?
I'm great. How are you, Barbie?
What kind of Barbie are you today?
I'm marketing Barbie today.
You are marketing Barbie today. You are.
What kind of Barbie are you?
I'm Teacher Barbie. Now, we pre-recorded when we left the movie theater a week ago. We pre-recorded our initial thoughts. And so now we're going to delve into the actual movie itself. This movie has been what Greta Gerwig says. She's the director and writer. She says that it's more than, just a movie. It's really a snapshot of our culture. So as you look at how people have reacted to this movie on IMDb, IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, 88% for critics review, 84% for audience review, really high numbers. Never mind the fact that what we're looking at, gross worldwide so far, is $823 million that have been brought in so far. Can you even fathom that amount of money?
It's wild.
It's
we
wild.
are studying their marketing campaign, and it's not a Disney movie. But we've done our own analysis of their marketing because it's been mind-blowing.
Do you have an opinion about why this has been such a phenomenon?
I think it's just right place, right time. I think they got really creative with their strategy. They definitely went outside of the box, which resonates with a lot of people. And it's funny, outside the box, because Barbie's in a box. But no, I think what I think really makes it, and this is kind of more of a deep level answer, but I feel like the message of the movie and the energy of the movie is why the marketing has resonated with so many people, because it's not a movie making fun of Barbie. It's not a movie making fun of women or shaming femininity or anything like that. It's a celebration of women and a celebration of all types of expression. And I think that's why that's resonated with so many people.
It really, like Elena was alluding to, it's got such a cotton candy exterior to such incredibly deep and profound messages inside that I don't know that I can even think of a movie that you could compare it to. This is a woman's world. Barbie Land is a woman's world. And you know what? To your point about the marketing, Lou, something that your Aunt Lisa said to me that I was like, that is really interesting. She said she didn't really initially have any desire to go see the movie, but she didn't want to be left out of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I think I think another reason why it's so big, to tie into what you're saying, is it's a movement for women, by women. And so I feel like as a woman, you almost feel this responsibility to go and see, even if, I don't know how it couldn't be, but even if it wasn't your cup of tea, like, this is for us. Like, this is for the girls. We've all got to be a part of this.
And they do. Okay, I want to ask you a couple of questions in that vein. Talk to me. The cast is very diverse, or I thought it was, I should say. If you haven't seen it yet, first off, we recommend you go see it before you listen to this, but because we're going to give you spoilers. But do you feel like they did a good job, a good enough job, yes, no, on showing the diversity of women?
I don't feel like I can necessarily speak on it, because I will say, like, this is a story about women. It's about feminism, femininity. And so I do feel like this movie is for the girls in that standpoint. But as far as speaking on diversity, I don't know how far what my perception could be on that, because so much of, up until recently, so much of Barbie has been whitewashed. And so, of course, I felt represented because I'm a white woman with blue eyes and blonde hair. But, to me, I'm like, oh, yeah, there's so many different colors of the rainbow in this movie, and so many different body types and ability types, and definitely much more than I've seen in other films recently, much more diversity. But I don't think I could fully speak to that question, you know, still falling under that white woman demographic myself.
I love that answer, Elena. Thank you for that, because that gives me a lot of perspective. I think that's really awesome. And I'm gonna trampoline off of that and say something. I've gone down a rabbit hole in the last 2 weeks over this movie. I've been a little bit obsessed over it. I've done a lot of research to the point where I got, to be very honest with our friends out there who are listening, I got to the place where I didn't know what to say. Which is interesting, to go back to what Elena was saying about all the different messages and plot points and issues that they bring up in this movie. It's almost overwhelming, to the point where if you try and narrow it down to a summative statement, you can't. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I went down the rabbit hole with was I was looking up on other movie platforms, what other Barbie movies, and I came across a 2018 documentary on Hulu called Tiny Shoulders, and I think it's the Tiny Shoulders, the reimagining Barbie, I think is the full title of it. And I highly recommend that, even if you have no interest in seeing the Barbie movie, or if you've already seen it, or if you've not seen it yet, that documentary gave me so much insight. Not just, I don't know how to put it into words, which I think is what I'm struggling with, is that I don't know how to put into words all the areas of the female perspective that documentary delved into. And I said to Aunt Lisa, I was like, it gave you a springboard of the conversation of feminism versus femininity, which you just said. But a lot of what it talked about, or the main point of the documentary, was to follow the process of when they took the Barbie doll and her figure that had been set for decades, and started talking about making different body types for Barbie and what that really meant, how they went about it, the demographics that they looked at. It did not test well with the little girls that they gave it to. And those little girls were of varied backgrounds, different sizes, different ethnic groups, and overall, the little girls did not like it. So the staff themselves, which are predominantly women, were at the time predominantly women that were on the Barbie crew, what they had to go through and how many months and all of the time, energy, different ways that they had to go about it, and all of the thoughts that went into it. How are we going to market her? What would it say on the box? They finally landed on curvy, but then they had to go through this process of the fact that they couldn't bend her legs in the right way if they didn't have a thigh gap. Well, they didn't want the thigh gap, because then that spoke to keeping the body type the way that it always had been. All of these things that a person would not think of, a person outside of this business would not think of. And I found it to be profound from the standpoint that I was not allowed to have Barbies growing up. My mother, who was very much a baby doll person, she was, very much into baby dolls even as a grown-up. Elena can tell you about that. Would not let me have a Barbie doll. And when I asked her and begged her, because come to find out in my research, over 90% of little girls own a Barbie at some point, and the average amount is 10.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
10 Barbies.
Mm-hmm. That my mom said she did not want me to think that was what a woman should or had to look like. So that was my experience growing up. Elena, what was yours?
Ooh, I like this kickoff. That's a good way to start it. I you and I kind of talked about this a little bit. I will say we've had some time between seeing the movie and now that we've had, like, it's been hard not to discuss. So we have discussed a little bit. But the way Mom was saying she wasn't allowed to have Barbies kind of played into my experience with Barbie. It wasn't that I wasn't allowed to have Barbies, but whenever Barbies got brought up, the conversation that I remember was always just Mom being like, well, I was never allowed to have Barbies growing up. And I think on top of that, like, I never, like, was without a doll because, like she mentioned, my grandma was obsessed with baby dolls. She was obsessed specifically with, like, American Girl dolls. And so since the time I was 2 or 3 years old, I've had an American Girl doll. I've had multiples. I don't even know how many I had. Probably, like, 4 or 5. Spoiled by my grandma. But so it wasn't that I was, like, wanting a doll and didn't have one. I was very much an American Girl doll girl. And then Mom did have a Kira doll that her mom got her when she was in college that I did play with. Like, that was, like, in your, I don't know, your
hope chest.
stuff. Yeah, your hope chest. And then, like, I played with that. Not a ton, just because I didn't have other Barbies to have her play with.
Yes.
But I did play with Barbies at Emily Franklin's house, and she had the dream house. She had probably at least 10 Barbies. Also, during my era was Polly Pockets, so I had a few of those. And then also, I always wanted a Bratz doll, and I know I was not allowed to have a Bratz doll. I wasn't not allowed to have a Barbie, but I was not allowed to have a Bratz doll.
Mm-hmm. And so, for those of you who haven't seen any of the interviews or that Tiny Shoulders movie, Barbie was born out of the fact that the founders of Mattel, Ruth and Elliot Handler and Harold Matson. So Ruth and Elliot were married, and they had a little girl, Barbara. And Barbara had baby dolls. And Ruth, the mom, started to realize that these little girls were playing with Barbie dolls, just like in the beginning of the movie. They're playing with baby dolls. And in that play, they were playing as moms, homemakers, wives. Mm-hmm. They were not seeing themselves as anything other than that. And they went to Europe. Her family went to Europe, and she brought back a Build Lily doll, which was actually meant for men. It was sold in gas stations as like a rear view mirror kind of thing, and she was sort of like a little sex symbol.
Like a hula girl?
Sort of like a hula girl, sort of like that. And they were sold in tobacco shops, and they weren't for children. But she brought them back, and she gave one to Barbara, her daughter, and she realized that Barbara started playing with her, and she was projecting future plans onto this adult doll. And she thought, here's a whole market for little girls. Where is the adult doll for them to see their futures in, for them to want more for their lives? And it's really cool. There's on that movie, Tiny Shoulders, there's audio of Ruth saying, I wanted to be more, and there was no example for me. I loved being a mom. I loved being a wife, and that's not what I wanted for my life. And I was like, whoa. So that's the kind of stuff that when my mom looked at Barbie, she didn't think about the fact that what it was really trying to project. And that's why you have all these different career dolls, that it's really trying to project that you can be anything you want to be.
Mm-hmm. And, I was thinking as you're talking, because for my life personally, I did not have career aspirations until I did my Disney college program and realized all the careers that are out there for creative people. And it doesn't just have to be, you have to make it big as a director or an actress to be in a creative, stable career. And so I think it's interesting because we were talking about, I had American Girl dolls. And American Girl, similar to Barbie, is all about feminism. If anything, the body positivity is a little better with the American Girl dolls. But I was just processing and thinking just now, like, why, if the message is so similar, why did I not have that obviously there's other things that go into your mindset with your career, but that wasn't on my mind. And I think because I only had historic American Girl dolls. And so the careers I feel like that they aspired to were very old school, you know, like journalist, or I think Molly wanted to be a gymnast or something like that. And, you know, what I do now is digital marketing. That's not something they had in the Great Depression, but I didn't know these things existed. And so I'm just curious, if I was sucked into the Barbie world as a little girl, would I have been more aware of these modern day career options for a woman? And not to say that that's the one thing that your future should ride on, but I'm curious if that has influenced other girls to say like, well, my Barbie works in business, or my Barbie does this or that. And so, you know, just even opening their minds to that possibility.
That's very profound. And like I said, I think if I'd seen Tiny Shoulders, which, you know, by the time that you were, what would you have been in 2016?
I was already in college in 2016, so 19 or 20.
It was too late, you know, by the time that this documentary came out, for me to understand that Barbie wasn't just about fashion. Almost, you could say, like Elle Woods wasn't just about fashion, you know, and they made an Elle Woods doll, and I thought, well, how wonderful is that? That makes perfect sense. That you can be into fashion or want to be a quote unquote girly girl and still have a brain and still have high aspirations for yourself in a career and with your life goals. And I think that, you know, my generation was only on the cusp of that. And the Tiny Shoulders movie also goes into the fact that when Barbie came out in 1959, we're on the cusp of the women's movement. Well, boy, howdy, did that send the women's movement into a tizzy. They were ticked off that this doll had come out, that she was so popular, the body image that it was portraying. And again, and Mattel's response to that was the career lines of Barbie. And then eventually, thank goodness, they got to the place where they made African American Barbie. And now they've since reimagined that into Black Barbie. What does that look like? So, and it just never dawned on me. I'm wondering if it did with you, because this is your job. Like, are you more in tune to the different ways that a division in a corporation has to look at how is this going to be received? What is the message going to be? What is the big thing in the documentary too was Time magazine had decided that they were going to do a cover piece on the reimagining of Barbie, of the new body shapes, but they didn't tell the directors it's either going to be positive or negative. They didn't tell them which one. So the night before the launch, they stayed up all night so they could see what the cover of Time magazine was going to say. Were they going to blow them out of the water? Or were they going to say, well done on you, thank you for catching up with the times? So does that resonate with you? Do you look at things from that lens now, through a marketing lens now?
Yeah, I think I do. I think I look at things half through a consumer perspective and then half through a marketer. And I feel like I still have so much to learn. I'm just now getting to a point where I'm marketing with IP rather than a doctor's office or a lawyer's office. You know, this is my first time doing marketing with brands and movie franchises and character franchises, and so I feel like I'm just getting my toe wet, so I'm just now starting to look at it from that perspective. But as a consumer myself, I've always just looked at it like, if I were to be in that role where, hey, there's going to be a body positive Barbie coming out, I would just, from my own perspective, be excited, not thinking of it through that lens.
I gotcha. So now let's switch to the movie. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts, because you and I have not delved into it. I don't know why. I'm getting a little emotional. I'm excited to hear. overall what you thought.
Okay, so to give a brief synopsis, I'm not going to tell the whole story because I know there are probably people out here who still have not had a chance to go see the movie, but I'm going to give you the background that you would see if you haven't seen the trailer yet. But essentially, there's Barbie Land, and it's the make-believe world. It's the world that's created when all little girls are playing with their Barbies. It's that imagination
That's
world.
a good way to put it.
And Barbie's living her life. Everything's perfect. She wakes up every morning. She waves to her homegirls, and she goes downstairs. She takes her perfect shower. She has her perfect breakfast. She puts on her perfect outfit that just magically gets put on her. She doesn't have to change herself. She floats down from her house every morning because nobody walks their Barbie down the stairs. And then it floats into her car where she's like 2 sizes too big for her car. But, you know, that's how Barbie is. And lives a perfect day every day. She sees her same people. The whole Barbie land is run by women. All the high power important jobs run by women. Construction sites are like the most female empowering places. It's like, think about the way the world is and then just reverse it. Like, everything's reversed as far as sex roles go. So like all of Congress is women, and then the men are just there. And so, you know, Ken, it's Barbie and Ken, not just it's Barbie and it's Ken. It's Barbie and Ken. So Ken's there. All he lives for is getting Barbie to look at him, which he really, really has to work for. And so Barbie's living her perfect day, the same day she lives every day. And then that night at her big blowout party with a choreographed dance and the Dua Lipa song, in the middle of her partying, she's like, do you guys ever think about death? And everything just stops. Everyone just stares at her.
Yeah.
And she's like, I mean, I'm dying to dance. And then everything's back to normal. But then ever since that moment, something's off. Something's changing with Barbie. She doesn't know how, what, why, where, what's going on. But the next day she wakes up and she's having the first bad day of her entire life. Her shower is cold. Her milk is spoiled. Her hair is not sitting right. Her toast is burnt. She falls off the roof of her house instead of floating down. And the kicker of it all is that she gets flat feet. So she's freaked out by these flat feet. Everyone's gagging over her flat feet. And they tell her she has to go to Weird Barbie because only Weird Barbie has experienced this and can give her guidance. So she goes to Weird Barbie, and Weird Barbie is the Barbie that got played with too hard. And so she's got crayon all over her face. Her hair's all cut off. She's always in the splits. They're like, why is she always in the splits? But it's so true. There's always that one Barbie that's all beat up in the Barbie bin with in the splits. But she essentially tells Barbie, this is the pinnacle of the beginning of the movie, is that something's going on between her and the little girl who's playing with her. And they're becoming one. And Barbie needs to go to the real world and heal this little girl playing with her so that everything can go back to normal. And so that's what Barbie does. She gets in her car, her Barbie dream car, and she goes to venture to the real world.
Okay, so very nicely done. Yes, Weird Barbie is played by Kate McKinnon. She was actually roommates at one point with Greta Gerwig, the director-writer, and that's how Kate came to be in the movie. And she, I think, is a pivotal character, not just because of the role that she plays, but because of her amazing comedic timing. Just as a little side note, I think I mentioned on our car ride home that Margot Robbie did just an amazing job. I was very pleasantly surprised with Ryan Gosling. Will Ferrell is the head of Mattel. When Barbie leaves Barbie Land, oopsie daisies, Ken has accidentally come with her because he can't exist without her.
Yeah.
And things go sideways. You know, Ken finds out that in the real world, men are revered and men are appreciated, and they're the only ones that are listened to. And, you know, talk to me about the real world experience in that scene. You know, it took about 20 minutes. Was there anything that stood out to you? I'm curious as to the cafeteria scene. I have a question for you. I know I'm throwing a lot at you at one time. I have a question for you about the little girl that stops her before she ever goes to Sasha. And I kind of was wondering if that was like an homage to Mean Girls. If Sasha and her friends sitting there mocking Barbie and the other little girl saying, you don't want to go talk to them. If that was kind of like another, I felt like there were a lot of little vignettes in this movie where it was like, and maybe if you're a woman, you've had an experience with this. And maybe if you're a woman, is that what you think that they were trying to do?
Yeah. So I think the purpose of the way Sasha and her friends treat her when she first shows up is because so far, right, she's gone to the real world. She's already been hit on and catcalled by men. When she was on the boardwalk, there were girls laughing at her too. But I feel like this scene with Sasha and her friends is really supposed to solidify, like, because Sasha even says later in the movie, she's like, everybody hates women. Men hate women. Women hate women. And so I think that's kind of trying to showcase the toxicity of, like, not only do men put women down, but even women can put each other down.
Yeah, I agree. So if y'all are listening to this and you haven't seen the movie, that's what we mean when we're saying that there's so many layers to this. Because the next thing you know, Barbie's in corporate Mattel. And unless I'm mistaken, wasn't everyone sitting around that corporate table a male?
Yes, that was on purpose.
Yeah. So there again, now they've switched to the place where it's like, now do you see yourself in the workplace? Do you see, hopefully that's not always the case these days, although I'm afraid it still is, where the higher ups, the majority of them are male. In this female-centered, just statistically, we know that Mattel is the shoulders of Mattel, tiny shoulders, is Barbie. Well, wouldn't it stand to reason then that the people who are taking care of that should be female? And so Mattel, I got to give Mattel props, man. They actually produced this movie. So they're poking fun at themselves. And I think that that's another beautiful thing about this movie is for them to recognize we know that this is skewed. And so now what are we going to do about it?
Ken is such an important role in this movie because I think so much of the movie's meaning is explained using Barbie and Ken. I think we've heard backlash that some people think this movie is reverse sexism and that it's man-hating, man-shaming, and I really don't think that was Greta's purpose or intent at all. I think Greta was trying to do a really smart thing of showing men how women are often portrayed, not only in reality, but also within film and media. And, the way that the Kens, Barbie Land is Barbie Land, and then the Kens are there. They're there, and they're there to stand next to Barbie and look cute. But they're, every night is girls' night is what they say, at the beginning. And I think it's important to note too, like, we get to a resolution at the end of the movie where Barbie's like, every night didn't need to be girls' night. It's not like, I don't think Greta's trying to glamorize the beginning of Barbie Land. The way Barbie Land is in the beginning, I don't think that she's trying to say this is how it should be.
Okay.
She's just trying to show the audience, this is like, look at the way this is. Flip the sexes, and this is most movies. It's all about the men. The women are there. They're fine. Nothing's happening. They're there. They're just there, but it's really about the men. And then at the end, there is that resolution of every night didn't need to be girls' night. But also, there's still a layer of poking fun where even at the ending, the Kens are like, talking to the president, like, can we have roles in the Congress? And she's like, well, we'll find you like a lesser role and then maybe you can work your way up. And I think the narrator says something like, maybe one day the Kens will have the same level of equality that women do in the real world. And so it's not about let's shit on the Kens or, let's make men feel bad. It's just trying to paint a picture of what the woman experience looks like.
I agree with everything that you said. I think that's what is so difficult with only watching this once is that you can miss some of the subtle nuances. You know, Helen Mirren is the narrator. She says a lot of like really key lines. My favorite of which being when Barbie is having an existential crisis and she's like, so we're just supposed to be pretty, and she's having a meltdown. She's like, don't look at me right now. She's like, you know, just to be clear, Margot Robbie is not the person that we should have in this role if we're trying to get the point across that you don't have to be beautiful. You know, like there's some really great lines in there about that. But overall, it's not just a suspension of reality, it is a switch of perspective, and it takes a gigantic leap. And it also, you know, nobody likes to be put in their place. And so I think some of the backlash that we're getting from this is really people who don't want to face the fact that this is what it feels like or has felt like in the past to be a woman in a man's world. Mm-hmm. You know, and some people just don't want to look at it. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to look at it.
I meant to also mention about Ken in the real world. The way Ken gets so excited in the real world, and he's like, oh my gosh, the guy is the boss. Oh my gosh, the guy is the doctor. I want men to understand, because I feel like men will see that and be like, there you go, Ken. There's your representation. And it's like, but don't you all realize that's how we feel when we see Barbie? The way Ken is so excited when he sees men in the real world, and he's like, there's a world in which this exists. That's us when we see a woman in control. Like, that's what I get frustrated with men or women saying that this movie is reverse sexism or whatever. It's proving a point that it's putting men in the shoes of women and how we feel. And so his level of excitement seeing his representation in the real world, whether it's imbalanced or not, is us even just seeing how Barbie Land is in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like women, we see Barbie Land in the beginning. We're like, well, that would be a nice change of pace. And just as when Ken goes in the real world and he's like, well, this is nice. People are actually listening to them. People are actually listening to men in this world. And so I feel like it's not saying one world is better than the other. It's try to shift your perspective to see what it's like when one sex has more power than the other.
And how interesting that is for every facet of not just gender, but to be able to say it's empathy at its core, right? Can I put myself in somebody else's shoes, even if I'm not, okay, quote unquote, designed that way? One of the things I thought was really profound in the documentary, when they came out with the various skin tones, which was in the 2000s, when they changed it so that there would be varying skin tones, not just two. One of the backlash from the newspapers and media was, oh, great, body shaming in every color was the tagline. Now we've got body shaming in every color. And I think there again, the perspectives sometimes has to do with, where is my hurt? Mm-hmm. I'm going to put my hurt and my perspective. Of course you do. You bring your perspective, your thoughts and feelings, your hurts to everything that you look at. So if you've already had a preconceived notion or you've had an experience that has given you a negative connotation, then what do they say? It takes like 13 positives or more than that to take over a negative, then this movie is just going to set your teeth on edge if you don't see the background of what they're really trying to say in every scene. And because it's so layered, and if you only look at it through one lens, it's really easy to get offended.
And I think some people too want to believe, or maybe it's been their experience, that I think people think, well, it's not like that anymore. And like, we have more inclusion now than we ever did. And yeah, we do have more inclusion now than we ever did, but there is still an imbalance. Also, depending on who you are and what your experience has been, it's going to vary across people. But I even like, to sidetrack a little bit, I've had experiences in my own life where I'm like, oh, like because of my gender, I've been treated differently. The number one that comes to my mind, because I feel like it's kind of relevant to this movie and what we're talking about, but when I was an undergrad at University of Lynchburg, most of the people in my degree or in my major were boys, because I was basically at my teeny tiny school. My major, communications with a focus in electronic media, was the closest thing we had to like a film program. And so it was a lot of these like film bros, which is fine. Love what you love. But I remember specifically I had this one class that was about film and media, and it was like a discussion class. And so we would literally sit at a desk and have topics and we would discuss. And I remember there was one day, it was me and two other girls. One of them, she didn't really speak English. The other one was super quiet. So I was the only girl to like speak up in this class. And the rest of the class was boys. And there was a conversation about diversity and inclusion in media and in the film industry. And I remember, first of all, and the professor was male. I really enjoyed him as a professor, but I felt like he dropped the ball with this conversation. We were literally talking about gender roles in the industry. And first of all these boys are going around the room. They all can't wait to share what they have to say, which is great. Everyone should get to share what they have to say. But I was a little twerked off that no one thought to say, let's ask the women in the room their thoughts. No one said that. Secondly, these boys were going around the room, and I'm not kidding you, multiples of them were saying, I think we should let them this. I think we should let them that. Let them, speaking as in, we should let women do this, let them do that. I'm not kidding you. That's how it was phrased.
Allow them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting there, and I think I ended up speaking up or whatever, and I think I said something too of like, well, as one of the three women in this room, I definitely like made a little dig, but it's real. It doesn't matter who you are. And like, thankfully I've only had a few instances like that, but it's not gone. It's still very much here. And I think the people that might be offended by this movie, maybe you're the person that needs to open your mind to it. And I don't want to ruffle feathers, but that's just my opinion.
Well, Elena and I had a conversation, and I'm not going to get into the specifics because I think we're going to talk about it on a different podcast, about where do we want this podcast to go? What do we want the focus to be? And that conversation was born out of, it was before I saw the Barbie movie, but after I watched Tiny Shoulders. I want to shift to two other areas of the movie that I want to make sure that we get to, one of which being the Rhea Perlman monologue at the end with Barbie. Rhea Perlman plays Ruth Handler, the creator of Barbie. And at the end, I'm going to try and say it without crying. She says, mothers stand still so that their daughters can look back and see how far they've come. And I just thought that was so beautiful, so profound and so true. Like, I watch Elena in this role at Disney and in her life and in her career make choices that I'm so incredibly proud of. And I know that her grandmother would be. And it's such an amazing gift to look at your daughter and say, I want to be her when I grow up. And I just am so grateful for that message in this movie, that it says to these young women, you don't have to try and live your life within the confines of what you saw your mother or the other females in your lives up until this point. That is your job to take up the torch and move forward for your little girl who is coming behind you. And to me, that was worth the price of admission. That was worth the price of production. That is the reason why this movie deserves to make the $1 billion that it's now set to make. They're saying it's going to make $1 billion. And if that message gets out there that we're relying on you, it is, yes, like exactly what Elena said. We've made strides, but we are not there. And so now it's your turn to take the torch.
Oh, girl, I'm crying. Yeah,
Did that speak to you on that same level, that one phrase?
No, 100%. Like, that whole scene, there's so much to unpack there. I've seen so many TikToks of how this movie's have impacted people, how they viewed it, how, different areas it spoke to for them. Ugh, I don't want to bawl my eyes out, but I think, wow, I'm like actually going to start sobbing about this, but I think it speaks to, like, I think sometimes people see, like, the feminist movement or, like, inclusivity for women, and it's like, oh, women just want to own everything or whatever, and that's not the case. I think, like, it's so much about, like, the innocence we have when we come into this world and we are playing with our Barbies and we're young and, like, we live in this world of innocence and just play and being who we are and embracing, maybe at that time you're also embracing your femininity and what makes you passionate in life, and then the world comes along, and that's what we kind of see with Barbie in the real world. Is like, I've seen girls making TikToks talking about this where it's like, I remember the first time I got catcalled and I was 9 years old, or you know what I mean? And it's like, I guess people have, the way I could sum it up, and I've seen people sum it up, is like, at what point did the innocence break for you? And you can even hear it in the lyrics of Billie Eilish's song that is played throughout the movie is, when did it end, all the enjoyment? I'm sad again. Don't tell my boyfriend. But no, and it breaks my soul because it's like, we have this innocence there, and women have this magic about them that we have from the time we're born. And it's so heartbreaking to see that magic get crushed by the world. And so I think that's what resonated with me with the movie, is protecting that innocence and that joy and that magic of what it is to be a woman, and not letting the world break that as hard as it may try. Does that make sense?
It so does, Lou. It so does. I think I hadn't even thought about that perspective. I had from the standpoint of, I wanted to ask you as a baseline question from after watching the movie, would you have wanted to have known? Or does it break your heart that Barbie went into the real world? Like, would you have wanted to have protected her? But you're just speaking to that. That's every girl. That's every girl. Every person. If, humanity in general, a loss of innocence. At what age did you feel like that was gone? That you realized the real world is a harsh place. It's a hard place. And it is for everyone, regardless of gender.
Right.
Since we're talking about women, I look at it too from the standpoint of America Ferrera's, I don't want to call it a rant, because that has a negative connotation, but she does have a monologue that is interspersed throughout some of the last scenes where she's like, women are told to be pretty, but then not too pretty, because then if you're too pretty, you're stupid. And then they're taught to be. And what hit me is she says a line where she goes, and women aren't allowed to be old. And that, because of my age, just was like, ooh, I don't think that we're ever done as women feeling like, great, when's the next shoe going to drop? When's the next thing that got, and so I feel like no matter what age, no matter what station in life you're in, no matter what background you come from, no matter whether or not you were allowed to have Barbies or you hated the thought of having a Barbie, that this movie, it really is about every woman's experience. And I think the more that we see of that, the more that women can band together instead of pulling each other apart. And I guess that's what I mean about the whole basis of G&I, that Elena and I were talking in that conversation about where do we want the podcast to go, that's really what it's about. Really what Elena and I, our goal is, how can women help women? How can we support each other? How can we lift each other up to get to the next level, like Ruth is implying in that last scene? And this, to me, is the culmination of all of that. This movie speaks to every single aspect of it. It speaks to Legally Blonde. It speaks to First Wives Club. It speaks to The Other Woman. It just is encapsulating for every area of the female. Would you agree?
100%. And I think that's also, I just think Greta was so purposeful with this movie. Yes, I was mentioning how, she's not trying to say one battle of the sexes better than the other. She's trying to get people to understand both sides of what it's like to be a man or a woman. But I think also the imagination versus reality, I feel like she's trying to speak a message of hope that even though, this will make me cry, but even though Barbie had the option to stay and just not have an ending and just live forever, live a happy day every day, she would rather be able to feel and have an ending and have a full story and be the one creating the imagination, not the thing being imagined. And I feel like that's part of why that montage scene is so powerful when Ruth tells her to close her eyes and feel. Because for me, what that scene was portraying was, it's so incredibly hard to be a human in general, but if we're just talking about women, it's so incredibly hard to be a woman. But how powerful it is to be a woman with other women and have connection with other women, and that incredibly euphoric experience is worth the heartache and pain. I feel like that was a message of hope that Greta is saying, is Barbie would rather have this with all of the pain than have no pain but no real connection.
I love that. That is beautifully said. I have no words to add to that. Well, before we could go on and on about this movie, people, I'm not kidding you.
Did you see in your research that montage was of the cast and crew? Like, those videos were like people's mom and people's sister. And did you see the interview with Greta and that guy? And he was like, my friend was in the montage. She passed away. Like, she passed away before Barbie was finished. Like, recently she passed away. Oh. But they have her in the montage. And, like, how powerful. And he's like, she would have loved it. She would have been so happy to be in it. And I just think that's so special. And I know that one, I don't know which one it is, but one of the shots is, like, Margot when she's a little girl. And I just think it's so powerful. I love that it's real people's videos.
Yes. Yeah, that was
that
was beautiful. You're right. Very powerful. We're going to end on a light note. I would like to know, so if you haven't seen the movie, the reason why it's, hi, Barbie, hi, Barbie, hi, Barbie, because if you've only seen the trailer, it may be a little confusing, but there are so many different Barbies out there that are named Barbie. I mean, obviously, there's other Barbie dolls. Like Elena said, I had a Kira doll. There's, Midge, and there's her little sisters and everything. And there's a bunch of different names. But there's a bunch of different ideations that are called Barbie. And so, Elena, from the movie, which Barbie resonated with you the most? And it's okay to say Margot.
Well, I think because we got to see the most of her story, and I almost feel like because she's stereotypical Barbie, she definitely can be the most relatable, because it's like very general experience of a woman. But I think of the other Barbies, I really resonated with, I think she was Lawyer Barbie. The girl that's like, I can hold both logic and emotion at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. She really stuck out to me. I feel like if I was a Barbie, I'd be her. And that's so funny because I don't think I could be a lawyer. But that's how I've grown in myself, as, seeing myself outside of like my relationships. and like hobbies and such, when seeing myself as a career woman and just, you know, my passions in life, I've had to really grow and accept that, like, yes, I'm a very emotional person, but just because I'm an emotional person doesn't mean that I can't also have a strong career, and I can't also hold logic and knowledge while also being an emotional person.
I
That's
love that.
something with my character arc that I have just had to really work on, because when I'm feeling bad about myself, I'm like, I'm not good at anything. And it's like, no, I'm very emotionally intelligent, but there's more to me than just that. And I can be both things at the same time.
I love that.
What is your answer?
I resonate with the author Barbie, the Pulitzer Prize winning author Barbie. I like her for the same exact reason, you know, that I look at it. I think also because I appreciated the scene where all of the Barbies were in the room and they're like, and let's congratulate, you know, whatever, Barbie for her accomplishment. And I just thought that was super cool, that it's like, because they were all clapping for each other and genuinely excited for each other. And I love that scene. I thought that was really profound.
Did you notice? Because that scene also stuck with me, because did you notice? So when we're seeing Barbie World, when it's perfect at the beginning, she wins her award, and when she accepts the award, she goes, I'd like to thank me because I worked really hard on this.
Yes.
And then when the Kins took over, they show it again, and she's like, I don't deserve this. Wow, I should thank everyone else but me. And then when they're convincing her, they have to de-brainwash her. They're like, no, you won a Pulitzer Prize. And she's like, I did. I worked really hard on it. And I thought it was so interesting, because anytime a lot of times when a woman gets an accomplishment, we never want to take the credit for it, even though we literally were the ones who did it. But we're like, I want to thank my husband and my editor and my
producer, my director, and it's
we're
never I worked really hard.
allowed to just say, and I want to thank myself. I'm proud of myself, you know.
A couple of little trivia side notes I wanted to mention. Elena said that, you know, Barbie floats down and we never walked our Barbies down the stairs, which was true. In the original Barbie dream house, there were no stairs. So even if you were going to take the time, which none of us would have, to walk our Barbie down, they didn't exist. She mentioned the fact that Barbie is, you know, larger than, well, that's because they did that on purpose. Barbie dolls are 23% larger than any of their actual, like the car and all that. She's 23% larger than she should be to be able to fit into that car. So they did a lot to make sure that Barbie Land, to Elena's point, looked like what it would feel like to live in that toy land.
And there's no elements. So there's no water, there's no fire, there's none of that.
Yeah.
Because if you the Barbie dream house, like, there's a pool, but it's a piece of plastic.
Yes.
It's like water, you know.
When she goes to take a shower, nothing comes out. Yeah. And then I will say Greta Gerwig said that when she wrote Ken, she wrote it wanting Ryan to play that role, that she already had it in her mind. And Ryan said yes, because he found his daughter's Ken doll laying down, face down in the mud. And he was
saw that.
Dude, what's going on with Ken? Nobody cares about Ken. Nobody takes care of Ken. What's going on here? Michael Cera, I thought, did a beautiful job as you know, the role of Alan. And I didn't know this.
Shout out to the Allens.
Shout out to the Allens, and that Alan in Barbie Land in real life is actually Midge's husband. I did not realize that.
Oh yeah.
So Midge is, you know, I don't even think she has a line in this movie, but she's played by the gal that plays Camilla Parker Bowles in The Crown. But poor little Midge got banned because she was pregnant, and the public outcry was, where's the husband? And
so we're allowed to play with baby dolls, but we're not allowed to have a doll that's pregnant.
Right. And so then they had to change the packaging and put Alan in the background so that everybody would know that she was married, and yet still the public was not happy with that. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Oh, Margot gave Ryan a daily gift that was wrapped in pink to get him in Ken's mindset. And they were asking the cast and crew what were things that if they could take things from the set, what would they want? Margot wanted the mailbox. Margot had to wear 18 different wigs in
Wow.
this movie. The wonderful costume designer was
I was
actually
going to say, we got to talk about that.
was actually the lady that was sitting on the bus bench that outside of the high school that Margot comes upon, and they have a quick little conversation, and the producers wanted to cut that scene, and Greta refused. She was like, absolutely not. So that's just some quick trivia just to make it a little bit more fun. But I would say, Elena, where would you rate this on a scale of 1 to 10?
Personally, it's like a 9 for me. I don't think that is what everyone would rate it, but for me, I'm a target audience, baby, okay? This was made for me. So I loved it.
I did too. I would say 8.5. And this is going to end up being, it is already the biggest debut from a female director in movie history. And so good on you, Greta Gerwig. We want to see more from you. We would love to hear more from you guys about what you think about the movie and your thoughts about Barbie in general. As always, I want to give the disclaimer that this is just Elena and I's opinions. These are our takeaways. This is not, like Elena said, we're not trying to slam on anyone, but this is where it spoke to us, and we're so interested to know where it spoke to you. So you guys have been really sweet about sending us messages when we drop these on Instagram, and we would love to hear what you think about the Barbie movie.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So Elena and I had already done the research. We've already watched Beaches, like we said, and we are going to do that next. I'm back in school. I started back to school this Tuesday, and Elena's got a lot going on, and so we will do our very best to be on schedule.
Like we said, as much as we want to be organized, this podcast is a pop-up shop. And we just love you guys. And we love the people that when we randomly pop up, they still listen. So thanks for bearing with us. And we just love you guys so much.
Yep. And we'll be back again soon. And keep us posted on what you would like to hear as well. We want to hear from you. So we love you. We will talk to you later. Bye, Sunflower. I love you.
Bye, Barbie.
Bye, Barbie.
Bye.
Girls' Night.